Hi, everyone. Jess Stainbrook here with the Invisible Disabilities Association on the Invisible InCourage podcast, and really excited today to welcome Sue Stevenson. Hello, Sue. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jess. I'm doing great today.
Well, it's so great to be with you. You know, Sue is part of our IDA board and has been for a while. And so that's how I got to know her. But I got to tell you, she's got a big background in all kinds of things that I'm going to let her explain most of it. I mean, when I pull up your bio, Sue, there's all these letters behind it. I have no idea what they mean. Maybe you can kind of give us some insight. What have you been doing and why are you part of the IDA board, right?
Well, I hope I know what the letters stand for. That would be the first thing. The one that I want to pick out is the CHP. Now, we all know that that's the Colorado Highway Patrol or the California Highway Patrol, but that's not what I am. That stands for a certified humor professional.
Oh my goodness, no way. That's really funny.
Yeah.
How does one get a humor certification?
Well, actually, you have to study for 3 years. It's a 3-year graduate program called Humor Academy. And so I'm not funny. You know, I'm just not one of these people. I'm not funny. But I've begun to intentionally look for humor, see humor, and building up, because that's one of the things that I think is important for us when we struggle or face challenges. Humor is so useful, and we cannot laugh while we're anxious.
How interesting. Well, I know we've done some stuff with Karen Buxman, and she's friends with you, and we're friends with her, and so I know she's also a humor professional. But yeah, that's really interesting. How do you see humor helping people in the context of mental health and some of the invisible disabilities that we're dealing with?
Well, the important thing is that people think humor is a joke. And we differentiate, and this was the biggest learning I had, the difference between the 3 purposes of humor. Most people just think entertainment. They think jokes and comics and stand-up comedy shows. That's not the type of humor that we focused on. The second type is for well-being, which is very relevant. And the third type is for influence. So leaders who use humor to influence, coaches who use humor with their clients, and so on. So the second one, the well-being, is really the most important. And the organization that Karen and I belong to is called the Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. So it's that application and that it's for therapeutic purposes. And when we think about invisible disabilities, I think of it about releasing tension, about lightening, creating a little bit of energy. You know, we can be so down and so hard on ourselves, and just finding a way for humor to lift us up. And that's the way I look at humor.
Yeah, well, I can see how that would be really helpful in kind of taking the edge off in what you're dealing with, and also to help others maybe engage better, because, you know, a lot of the discussion we have around people living with invisible disabilities is that, what do I say? How do I help? Like, how do I engage? And so if somebody's humorous about their own situation, it probably makes it easier on those of us that may not have disabilities to kind of get closer to them. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Now, you do some coaching and some consulting as well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I was in the corporate world for a long time, and when I eventually made the escape and got out, which was so wonderful, I set up my own business, and it's called Lifted Fog, because I used to live by the beach in La Jolla, and we get our traditional spring, May gray, June gloom, when the fog never clears. So I'd go down in the beach and go, come on, please, give me some sunshine. And so lifted fog, as the fog lifts. And then my clients often say, Sue, help me get out of the fog, help me get clarity. So that's what that is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell me a little. I know you have a book coming out, Impossible to Possible. That tell me about one. There it is. Awesome. Tell me, what's that about, and the journey for bringing something like that about?
Well, it's a blend of science and story. And I wrote it. I never thought I would be an author. My first book, I'm not an author really, but I went through such a big journey I write about a 15-year period. And during that 15-year period, there was so much that I learned. And people said, Sue, share it. Share what you've learned. So my primary purpose of writing it was to And it's really a story about stress. It's a story about chronic stress and about paying attention to our brain and our body. And I ignored it. I have what I call a push through mentality, which means, whether it's at work or anything, I can do it. I can push through anything. In fact, I'll tell you a little resilience story, which is a bit scary. I once did one of these self-assessments, a formal standardized assessment, and resilience was one of the scales. And when we got the results back, mine was a +10 out of 10. I'm thinking, I'm good. And it was from -10 to +10. And I remember being so proud of myself. And the facilitator comes back in the room after a break, and we looked at our results and says, anyone surprised at? I couldn't resist. And yeah. I'm +10 on resilience. He went, now what do you think might be a downside of that? I went, no, none. Because I always look at the upside. I can push through anything. I can overcome obstacles. So when he said, what's the downside? I thought, see a downside? And he went, well, perhaps you might ignore signs. You might be so gung-ho about pushing through obstacles and being blind to the reality that you might miss things. Well, that actually is what happened. I missed all the signs about my health. I missed the signs about my brain. And I just kept going. And people say, oh, I'm going to retire in 2 years. I can just keep going. It doesn't matter. I'll keep pushing through. And during COVID, think of all the people that had to just push through. And at first they thought maybe it was 2 months, maybe it was going to be 3 months, and it becomes a year. And they're saying, oh, I don't know if I can keep doing this. I don't know if I can still keep working with my kids and my dogs, or, I'm trying to protect my grandmother, and I don't know if I can keep this isolation up. And there were so many things that people had to push through. And I think for the first time, there was some understanding of what it's like to have an invisible disability where you are stuck at home and all your life, maybe. And you don't have, you do have that isolation and you are cut off. So I think that the awareness of what that's like began to widen.
That's awesome. That's a great way to put it as well. I mean, so many times as we're dealing with something based on our personality, we may tend to overcompensate for something. And yeah, it could certainly be detrimental if you're not careful about what it's leading into. Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, I noticed that too, you have an accent. I'm maybe tell us a little bit about your background from that.
Well, it is Scottish, and I'll do the little bit of Scottish accent for those of you who like it. So it's a British accent. And in fact, my grandmother spent years giving me elocution lessons to hammer out any chance that I would have a Scottish accent, because in her view, that was not proper for a young lady. And she would teach me. So she thinks of it as there's one line of pure British English language, and that is how the Queen speaks. And that is the neutral line. And my job was to get to neutral. And then once I'm neutral, all other accents in the world of English speakers are deviations of my neutral line.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's pretty wild. I remember an interview with Mel Gibson, who's from Australia. And the interview was saying, well, we're so proud of you because you speak English so well. And I'm like, okay, yeah, let's just pass that along. But yeah. And you and I have had some conversations about Outlander and the Highlanders and some of that fun. So yeah, I appreciate your accent.
And my grandmother, my grandfather, who the book is dedicated to, Ian Wilson MacDonald, he was a very prominent banker. And so he lived the very visible life, but he was the most humble man. And I didn't actually, now I follow his humility, but for years I tried and could never match it. My grandmother thought she was the Queen. I don't want to speak ill of her, but she really did think that. So she taught me how to do the wave. She taught me how to get in and out of cars without showing too much leg. She showed me all of these things because her mission was that I married into the upper echelons of British society and perhaps royalty.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure there.
Sure was. And it was a very patriarchal society. My father, he and I butted heads a lot because when I did go into business, he said, women have no right to be in business. We have
Mm,
no place. And we would have huge arguments about women and their role in society. And he said, no, your only role is to get married. That's your only purpose, and to raise a family. And I disagreed. So my grandfather hid me. He used to sneak me behind the sofa when they were having business meetings. So my brother, my father, my grandfather, and the business partner would all sit around, and I would be hiding behind the sofa trying to learn about business because I was not allowed in the room ever.
wow, that's something. Well, I do have to congratulate you because you do very well in business and you're a great leader. That leads me right into, how did you get involved with us at the Invisible Disabilities Association? And what do you see happening there that you're proud of? You see maybe we need some help? Just general overview of your participation and the things that you're seeing that are going on.
Right. I mean, I learned about the Association Invisible Disabilities from Karen Buxman and Heidi Hanna. And they were raving, and they were telling me how fabulous an organization. So as I began to delve and learn, I realized that I had been through an invisible disability of my own, even though it was something that I believe I cured. So it is not an ongoing, which most people is ongoing, and it's a lifelong suffering or challenge. Mine was shorter. And the issue, I remember I didn't want to tell anyone. When I first got my diagnosis, which I'll just say was a brain tumor, I remember thinking, oh, I can't tell anyone. I'll never get any more work. I'll never, ever succeed in business. This is the thing that will stop my business life. And so I hid it. Now, it was invisible anyway because it's inside your brain. But then I thought, I can't tell anyone. So I picked 9 people. And for the first year, they were the only 9 people that knew everything that was going on. And it was that a fear of sharing it, or because I was worried about people would ask me too many questions, or they'd ask me things that I was not ready to talk about, or that I was too emotional about. So I did have an invisible disability, and I wanted to keep it as private as possible. Now, others, it's not that they want to keep it private. It's just that the nature of their disability doesn't, they don't either have the opportunity or the language or the situation to talk about their disability. So when I came across, and it's okay if I call Ida, I was so excited that there were people who were so dedicated and so focused on trying to raise awareness about invisible disabilities. And then when I learned about your work in the work in the ID card, and Alaska was the only one at that time that had already made the approvals. And I just love the idea that somebody could volunteer and say, I'd like people to know, the law enforcement or first responders, I'd like them to know that I have something that they can't see, that they need to pay attention to if I'm in trouble. And so that ID card, and associate it with your registration of your car, or even just having something around your neck or a card, just to me began to change the environment in which people find themselves. And I'm so excited that we now have Colorado. And I had never listened to legislative things. I'm not American, so I didn't understand about the different chambers and how things happen, and committee to chamber. And I listened to every single stage and step of the Colorado hearings at every stage, and learned so much about what are the arguments for or against, and it was just so thrilling. And now the Utah and your work, you're just moving ahead in just such a great way. One day, everybody in the world will have the opportunity. Yay.
Yeah, I hear you there. And I appreciate your support of being on the board. And yes, it has been quite a journey, and very exciting. And it hasn't had its, bumps and, and bruises and roadblocks, if you will. But what we're finding is that a lot of the people, and again, it's a voluntary effort through the legislation. They don't have to get a symbol on their license if they don't want to. But what we're finding is a lot of people are really excited about having some type of government approved designated symbol that lowers or de-escalates a tense situation pretty quickly. And so we've partnered with some folks that are doing training out there. We've got all of our efforts and the ID cards going out. So yeah, it has been quite the adventure and continues to go. We've got the federal level version that provides funding for states that's happening. So we're working on that legislation as well. It really is step by step. So I'd say to anybody that's tuning in, if you know a legislator or a representative in your state, and we haven't gotten to your state, gosh, send us an email through contact@invisibledisabilities.org, and we'll take a look and we'll get in touch and, connect and try to get things moving there. But in the meantime, you can always go to our website and pick up the ID card to start utilizing that. So, well, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's really great to hear about who you are, what you're working on. Let me see if I can share real quick the website. If you want to know more about Sue and what she's doing with us here at IDA, you can check her out at invisibledisabilities.org and go to our About page. And she's there with the different things that she's working on, as well as the stuff that she does for us. And don't forget to go find her new book that's out there that's called Impossible to Possible: Neurostrategies for Healing Humor and a Reimagined Life, and it's available on Amazon. So,
just one thing on this: the neurostrategies. Once the surgeon had told me it was impossible to heal, and that was, tell a push-through person that it's impossible. Whoa, that was it. I was out, and I had no idea what to do. My doctor was very unhelpful. He even called me to tell me I had a brain tumor. I had really no knowledge. So of course, what you do is you dive in, you research like crazy. I became a brain nerd. I started the San Diego Brain Club, everything brain. But then I just began experimenting. Oh, what if I try that? What if I try that? What if I change my food? What if I change the way I move? What if I change the way I sleep? And there are 130 things that I tried, which I call neurostrategies because they're all to do with the brain, that I totally healed. So there's ideas, and if people read it, I am sure they will get some little nugget that will be helpful for them. My brother, even yesterday, he told me that he had read the book, which was for him who doesn't read, it's pretty cool, and that he had just learned something about himself, and that he had 2 steps on mental fitness and cognitive capacity that he was going to follow up with. I thought, yes, somebody has got it.
That's so amazing. Well, thank you again for writing all that, and really good tips. I mean, a lot of times when we have invisible disabilities, we'll try anything, but it really is good to connect with others that are going through it to see what's going on. And I think that your neurostrategies are going to be key for helping people through this. So thanks for doing that. Again, the name of her book is Impossible to Possible. It's available on Amazon. So, Sue, I know that you've got a bunch of different neurostrategies for the healing side of that. I mean, how do you talk about the hope side of what people are dealing with, and maybe some ways to help yourself through that with invisible disabilities?
Yeah, I just would love for people to believe that most things are possible. Not everything. We know that not everything is possible, but just believing that we can change. Sometimes we think, oh, no, I can't even imagine getting to tomorrow. But that's okay. Just believing you take one small step. I remember when I was really sick, just taking one step, and I thought, I'll walk around my sofa today. And then I walked further, and then a little bit further. And everybody who suffers, who's managed to make some progress or just get through their day, knows just believing that you can make some change, that there are things, and some of them are very simple. Like growing your own food. I grow my own food now, and I just love the process, the eating, the healthy. So there's many, many things we can do that we may, in those days where we think there's no end in sight, there is some hope. And hopefully I bring that in some of my writing.
Anything else that I haven't asked you that you want to wrap up our conversation today?
Yeah, I'd like to get back to humor, maybe wrap it up, come right back to humor. Humor has so much power to heal. I cannot underestimate that. Yeah, I have my go-to library of humor. If I have a down day, I have quite a few friends and family members with invisible disabilities, and I use humor with them. So just don't. And there's a whole section on humor because I didn't know all about that then. But so I wrote a whole chapter, what I know now that I didn't know then. And humor is a big, big part of that. So don't underestimate the power of humor.
That's awesome. And the humor had to do, some people think it's jokes, but a lot of it's wellness conversation and the way you treat it, right?
Yes. And the AATH, Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor, is fabulous. And Humor Academy, if you're looking for something a bit different, that, you're looking for some new learning, a new way of stretching your brain, Humor Academy is just wonderful. And Karen Buxman, who you mentioned, leads the whole Humor Academy.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Well, it's been wonderful hanging out with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. You want to see our shows, the other Invisible InCourage programs that we've done, we do have a YouTube channel, and you can find all of this stuff and the links on our website at invisibledisabilities.org. Thanks so much for joining me. Sue, thanks for being with me today. And we'll see you guys all online in our podcasts and everything that we're doing. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.